One, two, three. Okay, we should be alive now. Do me a favor before I start. Oh, do me a favor before I start. Let me bring this up. And I'll come back to that question at the end. But do me a favor before we start. Please stand up. And don't look so worried. Put your hand on your heart. If I was at home in Ireland, I'd say it's on this side. Okay? Put your hand on your heart. Turn around and face the back of the room. Okay? Now, please be careful because there's a lot of furniture, but take one step forward. Fantastic, wonderful, thank you. Perfect, you can sit down. Your part is finished, my part begins. So please sit down. And if I was a smart ass, I might say, well, now I know the microphone works. But in actual fact, it has a much more serious intent. When people ask you after the summit today, what was the summit like? Or if you feel inclined to go onto social media and post on the summit, you can now say, they got us on our feet. They touched our hearts. They turned us around and they got us moving forward. So for helping us get 500 people instead of 250 people in the room next year, thank you very much. So we've spoken so far a lot about emotional intelligence. And what was really nice for me, who has not got one word of finish, was to feel the passion from some of the people that spoke this morning. I mean, there's an expression a mentor of mine used to use. He said, who you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. And Paulina is an absolute perfect example of that. Even with no finish, I got the sense, I felt her heart. And the problem with emotional intelligence is that since Goleman made it a thing, he really kind of stole it off two other folks, but that's another day's job, or another day's work. But since he made it a thing by publishing his book in 1995, it's been one of these dry, academic things that we all know exist. We all know there's research that says it's good to have. We all know we should be doing something about it, and yet most people are not, because it's not real to us. So the first thing I want to do today is bring you back in time in your lives, each of you, to a time when the emotional intelligence of the people around you impacted you in a way that you still feel today. Because before we talk about what you should do about emotional intelligence, we have to understand how does it impact us? How has it impacted you? How is it impacting every single interaction you have with every person in your life until now and from this point forward? And to do that, you're going to need the nice little booklet that the folks gave you, because I'm going to do a very quick exercise. And I'm going to ask you first off to think of the best boss you ever worked for. Now, if you never had the pleasure of working for a boss who you say was good enough to make a best list, well then think of the best colleague, the best mentor, but somebody who inspired you, the best boss you ever worked for. And I'd just like you to put their name on the top of this. And if you're sitting beside somebody and you don't want them to see these names, you can use code names, whatever you like, initials, just to keep it private. But please write something down, because I want your mind to start tuning back to what it was like to be around that person. And I'm going to ask you to think back to how that person turned up, how they showed up in the world, what they were like day to day in the way they dealt with you. And I'm going to do that by asking you to look at 5 or 6 behaviors, and by telling me how often they displayed them by comparison to everybody else. So let's imagine that one of the behaviors was tells wonderfully funny stories. Okay? If that was one of the behaviors, well then a score of 5 would be, oh yeah, Deiric told more wonderfully funny stories than anybody else I ever knew. A score of 1 would be Deiric was humor bypassed. He would have done very well in the funeral industry, in the undertaking industry. And a 3 is, it kind of in the middle, average. So let me start, and I'll give you an example of the first one, and the rest of them we'll go through. Demonstrates awareness of their mood and emotions. How many people here have in the last year, say, walked into a meeting where you knew there was going to be friction, where you knew there was going to be a little bit of tension between people, yeah? And if it did, not in the last year, you're lucky, but certainly in your life, you've had those. A few months ago, myself and our CFO, our Chief Financial Officer, were meeting a client who had got, as the Americans would say, got his panties in a bunch. He was getting upset about something, and it was very obvious from the emails that he was fairly upset. So for those conversations, you always prepare very well, the best you can, but it's still tense as you walk through the door. And I don't know what they do in Finland, but in Ireland, it doesn't matter how serious it is. People always say, how was the traffic? Wow, terrible weather we're having right now, right? How are the kids? So you do all those preliminary pleasantries, and everybody's all friendly. And then the meeting got to a point where people started taking little bites. You know what I mean? When they start saying little snitty little things that they're not big enough for you to argue with, but you know that it's one of those. And just as this started happening and the temperature in the room started to rise, my colleague, Marie-Jean, MJ, excused herself to the bathroom. So I want you to imagine that you're me in that situation. It's like you're swinging in the wind. Suddenly you've got 3 people across the table, and all they want to do is tear your head off. And she goes to the bathroom. Okay? And so she leaves, and I feel a little uncomfortable. And she's back in 30, 40 seconds later, and we carry on. And after the session, I said, man, when you left the room, I didn't say to her, what'd you go to the bathroom for? I said, but when you left the room, it was kind of tense. And she apologized. She said, but some of the things that they were saying were getting me so triggered. She actually used the expression pissed off, but I won't use that in polite company. So they were getting me so triggered that I knew if I didn't do something, I was going to say something I'd regret. So I did what my mama told me to do. And her mother told her, you go to the bathroom, you run cold water over your wrists, dry yourself off, come back in. And it's probably some people call it the sacred pause. You just want to take a breath, whatever it is. But what she showed, if I was to score her on this, I'd score her a 5 because she knew that she was about to go boom. She demonstrated, it was very clear to me, she had an awareness of her mood and emotions. So let me take you back to the best boss you ever worked for. To what extent did she or he demonstrate awareness of their mood and emotions? 5, absolutely extraordinary. 1, none whatsoever. So just write down a number for that person, please. I'm going to steal some water here. I'm not going to steal some water. Ava? Oh, there it is. Sorry. Thank you very much. Cheers. Okay, the other 5 are easy. You won't need examples. Makes others feel appreciated. Doesn't take much. Please, thank you, good morning, how are you? Nice dress, nice shoes, how are you doing? Anything like that. So you know what that means. 5 is made everybody feel appreciated most of the time. 1 is we were all invisible. 3, open and honest about mistakes. Now, I don't know about you, but I can be totally open and honest about your mistakes. I can be absolutely blunt, but my mistakes is not as easy. That takes a little bit more. So a 5 is mea culpa, I screwed up, I dropped the ball, whatever it is. That's a 5. 1 is, who can I blame? Who can I stitch up for this? And 3 is in the middle. 4 is makes ethical decisions. Again, isn't it always easy to do the right thing when it doesn't hurt us? But it's when it's going to cost us money or it's going to cost us face that doing the moral and the ethical thing is tricky. A 5 in this did the right thing regardless. A 1 was, what did they call it? There is an expression for ethically pliable or something. No, I can't remember. It's gone. But you get the idea. 5, manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. You know that that boss didn't if the first question you asked of your colleague when you arrived in the morning is, what sort of mood is he in? Because if that was the first question, you know he was a 1 or a 2. Okay? So the 5 is the Zen master. The wheels come off the business, things go badly wrong, it collapsing around, and he says, don't worry, we can do something about this. Let's just take a breath. 1 is, the sky is falling. So 5 high, 1 low. And finally, recognizes others' hard work and achievements. And the first book you ever read on management, the first book you ever read on motivating people said, catch people doing things right. It should be absolutely imbued into every single one of us, and yet people don't do it as a natural course. 5 is, they went out of their way to catch us doing something right. 1 is, eaten bread is soon forgotten. So you get no feedback or no recognition whatsoever. So add up that number, just to do a tot on the end, and if I did it right, you should have a sum somewhere between 6 and 30, and we'll come back to that. Let me ask you, does anybody, I'm not going to ask you for names, does anybody know somebody in their lives who, when they walk into the room, they suck the energy and the optimism and the positivity out of the room and the temperature drops 2 degrees? Yeah. Everybody knows somebody like that. My old mentor, he's passed away sadly, he said, Deiric, I won't do the accent, he was American. He said, there are people walking around with umbilicals sticking out of them, psychic vampires. He said, and they're looking for people like you to plug into. And when they plug in, they suck all the positivity out of you, but they don't become any more positive. They just make you more negative because misery loves company. And so, what about, do you know somebody who, when they walk in the room, the temperature goes up a little bit, the room smiles a little bit, and you feel, show of hands? Yeah. Here's the key truth, and this is why, this is the core of emotional intelligence. The way that we show up, the behaviors that we bring into the room with us determine directly how people feel. So I want you to think back to when you were working with that best boss, and maybe you were making your commute on Monday morning, on the bus, on the train, in the car, or Sunday night you were thinking about it. Write down 3 words, the first 3 words that come into your mind that are expressive of how they made you feel. What was it like to be around them? If they made you feel depressed, sad, angry, write that down. If they made you feel happy, upbeat, whatever are the first 3 words that come into your mind, please write them down. And I'll give you, let's say, 10 seconds just to do that. No pressure. And then finally, let's go all techie. Have you ever come across this expression, discretionary effort? Okay, don't worry about it. I use it because it's one of the only formal phrases I've heard used for this. Gallup talk about that little bit extra that you and I give in a job when we're engaged. When we like what we're doing, when we feel able to do it, when we're operating in what that man with the unpronounceable name from Hungary, Cheek sent me high, calls flow mode. Discretionary effort is what we measure on the bottom line in organizations who have highly engaged people. They get higher returns or higher earnings per share, higher productivity, and in general, better results. The expression used for that little bit extra that people give is discretionary effort. It's I would use in English, it's going the extra mile, okay? You couldn't sack somebody for not giving discretionary effort, but you know when they are, because they're going the extra mile. Now, I don't want you, I'm going to ask you to rate in a moment something. I don't want you to rate how hard you worked for this boss. Because my experience from years in business, in people development, is the majority of people really genuinely work as hard as they are capable of in any given situation. Or at least that's what I choose to believe. I have a fundamental faith in people that says that the majority of people work as hard as they can. But you take somebody who has that, who is part of that majority and turns up on day one to a job and wants to give their best, and you put them into the hands of a beast. You put them into the hands of a bad manager, and that manager can either turn the dial up and turn them on, or turn the dial down and turn them off. And you've had that experience. So I want you to think, the best boss you ever worked for, to what extent did they make you want to go the extra mile? 1, 2, 3, they had zero effect on the effort I gave. If I worked hard, it was because I wanted to work hard. If I didn't work hard, it was because they made me not want to work hard. 8, 9, 10 is, yeah, they lit a fire in me. If they were somebody that you said, when I worked for her, I did things I didn't know I was capable of, well, then they're an 8, 9, 10. If you said, I was in that job for the paycheck, then it's probably 1, 2, 3. So best boss you ever worked for, give them a rating. So tell me, any Star Wars fans in the room? Whoa, fellow geeks. Okay, even if you're not a Star Wars fan, everybody knows who Luke Skywalker is, right? This guy is Luke Skywalker. Now we're going to go to Darth Vader. The Darth Vader from your working life, the worst boss you ever worked for. I want you to think of that person whom you say, there is not enough money in the world for me to go back to them. Well, there might be enough money in the world, but you know, they're not likely to give me enough money to want to go back to them. The worst one you ever worked for. And we're going to go through that process again, but a little bit quicker. And I'm going to ask you to look at how did they show up. And first, to what extent did they demonstrate awareness of their mood and emotions? 5, total self-awareness. 1, 0. So give them a score. To what extent do they make you and others feel appreciated? 5, man, I knew I was the center of their universe. It was like being in a conversation with President Bill Clinton from the United States, who was reputed to be able to give you so much of his attention that you felt like you were the only person in the universe. Sadly, anyway, that's another day's work. Third one is open and honest about mistakes. Mea culpa, it was me, I screwed up. Or 1 is, who can I stitch for this? Makes ethical decisions. 5 high, 1 low. Manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. If something went wrong and they exploded, they're closer to 1 end. If something went wrong and they said, okay, it's bad, but let's see what we can do, they're closer to 5 end. And then finally, recognizing other people's hard work and achievements. Now, it's always interesting. The only people in the world, and I've done this in every imaginable nation you can imagine, the only people who ever ask, but I'm surprised it hasn't come up, the Americans usually ask, hey, can I use a negative number? Is it okay if I go negative on this? And you get scores on this to go down below the 0. If you happen to do that, that's okay. So again, I want you to think, this is the worst person you ever worked for. Bring them to mind. How did you feel when you were around them? How did they make you feel? And just give me 3 words. 3 words that say how they made you feel when you were around them. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And then finally, to what extent did they turn you on or turn you off? Now, I'm not asking how hard did you work. I'm asking how hard did they make you want to work? And 8, 9, 10, I would have walked over hot coals for this person. 1, 2, 3, I was there month to month for the check. Okay, so just for the which, and of course, if you want to go negative, you can go negative. Okay, so let's start. So tell me about the experience. Shout out some numbers, if you would, for the scores you gave to the best boss. Anybody? 40. Wow, that's a good deal. That's my first 40. 26? 28? 24, 27. Okay, let's do this. Anything higher than, well, nothing higher than 40, so we're up at the high end. Anything lower than 24? 18? Okay. Anything lower than 18? Super. Okay. So what about Darth Vader? What score did you give Darth? 0, which wasn't allowed, but I applaud it. Absolutely. That's heartfelt. So you gave him a 0. 0, 11, 10, 12. Did I hear a 5? 5, 6. Okay, let me go. Let me put on the 7. Let me go. Anything lower than, well, you can't go lower than 0. Anything higher than 12? 14? Okay. 16. Okay, let's go to 16. Anything higher than 16? Okay, so the first thing I just want you to notice is that we've just looked at 2 people. Each of you picked 2 different people from your life. And I want you to notice the difference between the scores, and I hope you can kind of see them over there. We got a score ranging from 0 up to 16. Typically, what we get here is usually low double digits, but more typically single digits. Okay, but you will get every so often, for a whole variety of reasons, if we unpack it, whoever had the 16, maybe they were lucky and the worst boss they ever had was pretty good, okay? Or even bad bosses, even some people who are the worst boss you've ever had do some things really well, okay? So it's possible they're to save them. Okay? But what I want you to notice is, and I'm not mathematical, so I'm not going to try it, but if you were to add those together and get an average, and add those together and get an average, there's a dramatically different number there. Okay? It's dramatically higher on that side. So first thing is, the difference between your best boss and your worst boss, when we view it through a lens of just 6 behaviors, is quite different. Quite dramatically different. Just 6 behaviors so far. But let's talk about some of the words that you used for the best boss. What did you write down when I asked you for words for the best boss? Anybody? Appreciated, safe, capable, safe, confident, human, proud, enthusiastic, empowered. Yeah, empowered. That's why I wasn't a school teacher. Empowered, yeah. Focused. Okay. Give me one more just so we fill the page. Innovative. Okay. Now, when I look at that, so let me just look at this person. And it's really interesting because, strictly speaking, and it's very mechanical to say so, but we choose the way we feel. It may be an unconscious, but we choose the way we feel. And yet, somebody can come along like this, and they can raise the temperature of the way we feel. They make us feel appreciated, make us feel capable, make us feel safe, confident, proud, enthusiastic, empowered, focused. I would argue that not only was this person being a fairly decent human being, but they were just doing the job they were given to do. Because you gave them, or they were given, the most expensive assets in the organization. They were told, make a return on this investment. And so they made these people feel appreciated, capable, safe, confident, proud. And what about Darth? What words did you have for that? Nauseated. What was that first one? Replaceable. Wow. That's harassed. What was that second one that I had there a moment ago? I didn't want to lose it. Nauseated, yeah, it was just such a strong word. Nauseated, yeah. Guilty. Empty. I don't know if you've seen on the web at the moment, there's 121 artists have rendered what their experience of depression felt like. And the majority of them revolve around this whole thing of empty, that sense of emptiness. For a person to be able to make you feel empty is a horrendous thing. Somebody else. Insecure. Miserable. Unmotivated. Miserable. Unmotivated. Was that cheeky? Cheated. And I missed one just there a moment ago. Annoyed, okay. So you're starting to see the trend, okay? You probably read all the same books I have, and Stephen Covey, 10 years ago, he did an exercise. Imagine that you've just died, and you're lying in the box, and all the people who worked for you and worked with you and your family are talking about you, and they're saying the impact you had upon them. This is probably not what you were looking for, okay? And I would argue it's probably not what they were looking for. They have some way found a way of being the way they are that has that impact upon people. Because what's really clear, and we know this intuitively, but we see it from the research as well, and you see it from your experience. The way we show up, the behavior we choose to display determines the way other people feel. And that's whether it's people that you meet in the airport after your flight has been cancelled and the person behind the counter, whether it's your kids in the evening, your wife, your husband, the people you work with. The way you show up determines the way people feel. And that is the beginning and end of everything that we need to know about getting the best out of people. Because I don't even have to go to the next step I'm going to show you, because you've already made that leap. People who feel appreciated, capable, safe, confident, and proud, they produce different results to the people who feel this way. And if you want a demonstration of that, let's have a look at that and see, what did you put down for discretionary effort for the best boss? So on this one, the extent to which they turned you on, what did you give as a score? 9? 9, 10, anything higher than 10. Okay, anything lower than 9? 8, super. Lower than 8? Okay. What about Dart? 3. 0. 2. No lower than 0. Higher than 3? 5. 7. Okay. That's an interesting one. Who said 7? Do you mind if I ask you why 7? Just curious. It comes up quite a lot, but.
Well, maybe I thought something.
Yeah. So I'll show you what I'm capable of, right? Screw you. Yeah.
The last one. Yeah.
It's that one. And then can I ask you, how long did you stay after in that job?
3 months.
Yeah. And that's classic, because that is exactly what I say. The majority of people show up in the majority of jobs and they want to do the best they can. They show up with a preparedness, most of them, to work hard. And then somebody can take you like that, and you were driven by your character, not by that person's action, to show them, to stick it to them, and then you left. Okay? So they might go around deluding themselves, well, beating people up that way gets great results, and I got better results out of you than I ever would have gotten. But 3 months later, you weren't there. So that is a classic thing. So here again, let me just say, and this is my mantra for this presentation, this is my mantra in general emotional intelligence. The way you show up, the way you behave, determines the way people feel. Here's the next step. The way people feel determines the extent to which they are capable of engaging. Because if you're feeling like that, I don't care how driven you are not finding yourself getting lost in the zone, working your ass off, feeling good about things and producing that extra 15, 20. You're not capable of that because your brain is continually triggered into a threat state. So this lady put it perfectly. It's so almost overquoted, Maya Angelou. People will never forget the way you made them feel. And sometimes I go around the room, I won't now because I'm watching my time, and I ask people, how long is it since you worked for those people? And the longest I ever had on the negative one was 34 years. You have to have people with this color hair. 34 years since they worked for them. And they still remembered vividly the experience of working with them. I did this a couple of months ago, and a lady said, like killing her or me. And there was a nervous laugh around the room. And there was a nervous laugh because people went, ah, I know exactly what she means. It wasn't humorous. It was kind of, oh, yeah, that's just a little too uncomfortable. And that's the way people impact us. We never forget the way they feel. Now, I can show up like this guy on the left 4 days a week, and on the 5th day, I can show up with a bear with a sore paw, because we are all human. And sometimes we have days where it doesn't work as well. I call them Mondays, and where you're not quite the same person. And what do people say then? Give him space. This is not him. It's not the usual. This person can have days when they show up and they are the center of a sunny universe. And what do you say? Well, by the way, what do you say? When they show up and they're all friendly and helpful and nice, what do you say? What's she looking for? What's going on here? Count your fingers type of thing. Now, already Pekka showed you this model. And he showed you 6 scales that he measured, that we measure using this Genos model. I want to show you, they're not there by accident. They are there because they are representative of the sorts of behaviors we need to feel from the people around us to be able to find ourselves in this sort of comfortable state. So what we did was, in this model, there are 6 scales. In the assessment itself, we have 7 behaviors. We just used 1 from each of the scales. So you rated your best and your worst boss on demonstrates awareness of their mood and emotions. That's one of the items from that assessment. You measured them on the extent to which they were empathetic or aware of others, sensitive, made others feel appreciated. And so we took, out of 42 behaviors, we took just 6 of them. And you were able to identify the difference between the best and the worst boss. Now, here's the reality. We don't live in a binary world. For the most part, our lives are not populated by blacks and whites, by Dart and Luke Skywalker. We, ourselves, and the majority of people, are somewhere in the middle. We're somewhere in shades of gray. We do some things really, really well, and we do some things not so terribly well. Some of the things about the way we show up really turn people on, and some of them turn people off. And I guarantee you that 80% of these people don't know the impact they're having. Or if they know the impact, they don't know where it's coming from. And they don't know how to change it. Because nobody gets up in the morning and says, I can't wait to get to work. Because I want all the people by the end of the day to feel harassed, nauseous, empty, insecure, miserable, unmotivated. You know, that's only in comic books. Majority of people don't want to have, but they've learned that way, if you like, of being. So the critical thing to recognize with emotional intelligence is, with all of the garbage and the academic stuff that's spoken about it, emotional intelligence is simply the skill set to show up in a way that makes us more human and recognizes the fact that the way people feel determines the extent to which they can engage. And these are sort of typical. You see somebody who's anxious, they're going to be reactive. You see somebody who's stressed, they're going to be aggressive. You see somebody who's fearful, they're going to blame other people, and so on and so forth. So the way that people feel determines, or the way that you show up determines how people feel, and that determines the extent to which they can engage. And emotional intelligence, therefore, should only be one thing, and that is making intelligent responses to negative emotions using specific skills to generate positive emotions in oneself and others. Because we don't just interact with other people in a less than perfect way. In fact, the person or the people with whom we tend to act worst are very frequently ourselves. We're frequently hardest on ourselves. So emotional intelligence is just simply understanding, hey, the way I show up determines the way people feel, and it's about using intelligent response to negative emotions to create positive situations. And you know what? It works. Daniel Goleman introduced this in his book in 95 or 96. And at that time, I worked for a company called Profiles International. And and Profiles still do, some of you will be clients of Profiles, did assessments for hiring people and psychometric assessments. And people at the time just said, there's this new thing called emotional intelligence, Deiric. What do you think about it? It's freaking garbage. It's absolute BS. You know, it's rubbish. Why do you say that? Because there's no evidence. It's a nice idea, but there's no evidence. Now, roll forward 25 years, there is evidence coming out our ears. I'll show you two pieces just to make the point. Very frequently when people talk about emotional intelligence, they talk about it in connection with leaders. Let me just slightly change that and talk about it in connection with another context, sports sales. This was a group of 70 plus high-end salespeople in Sanofi Aventis. We took half of them as a control group, and we gave them no training whatsoever. We took the other half, and we looked at how do they show up? What behaviors do they demonstrate of the emotional intelligent behaviors that are in our model? And where we identified one or two that were lacking in each of those people, we gave them some coaching and training to help them raise that. This is the situation 6 months later, 12 months later, I beg your pardon. The people who were trained were performing an average of 12-point-something% higher. Not because this is magic, but because the way you show up determines the way people feel. The way people feel determines the way they engage. And until you know how you show up, you have no idea how you're making people feel and the extent to which you engage them. And sales, at the end of the day, is an engagement sport. This one was a huge study with IBM. And each of those little dots, do I have a pointer here? Let me see. Yes, I do. Each of those little dots is a collection of employees. Okay? So we put hundreds of leaders through the EI assessment. And at the same time as we had their employees, the direct reports, feed back on their emotional intelligence, we also had them feed back on the extent to which they were engaged. So we had, here's the emotional intelligence of the people they're working for, here's how engaged they are. Okay? So you take this little group of people down here, and you can see on the EI, God help us, there's somewhere on out of a possible 100, there's somewhere around the 15 mark. And you can see that those people were feeling actively disengaged. Now, I know a lot of people in the room here are experts in engagement. You suffered through the pain of trying to engage people. But so you know when I say actively disengaged are people who are trying to figure out how to break anything that's already working. It's not even that they're passive. They're out to bring everybody over to their own twisted side of the fence. So, and you can see, okay, it goes up. Here we got a little bit higher on the emotional intelligence, and we're still actively disengaged. Now, what I want you to notice, and if you could see, we talked about Star Wars fans and geeks. Any statistics people in the room? A couple of people. Isn't that the data you want? Look at the line. It practically runs from the bottom left up to the top right. You got this straight line that basically shows the higher the emotional intelligence of the leaders, the higher the engagement of people that worked for them. And once you got beyond about the 74 or 75th percentile, well then there were pretty much no people in the not engaged, and most of them were up in the engaged side of things. And you wouldn't need to look at 100 people. You only have to look at this. Because the way he showed up or she showed up determined the way you felt, determined the way you engaged. So my point here is there are thousands of studies like this, thousands of credible studies. We're no longer at a stage where you say, yeah, I don't believe in that. You don't have to believe in gravity for gravity to do its thing. You don't have to believe in emotional intelligence. The numbers are there, the stats are there. So, and if you need one final piece, I don't know if you've seen this pass through, but the World Economic Forum, every 5 years, they publish the 10 top skills they believe will be necessary for success 5 years later. Okay, so in 2015, I hope it comes up there, you can see there's no sign on there of emotional intelligence. And you heard Pekka earlier on talking about the importance of emotional intelligence as we go into a less human world over time. And you see for the first time in 2015, it appeared as number 6. And I predict when we come to 2020 that emotional intelligence is going to be right up the top of that, because all of the research is saying those things that will differentiate organizations and individuals from their peers are the things that make us human. The ability to inspire, the ability to be empathetic, the ability to feel into somebody else's situation, the ability to empower people. So there's just so much evidence out there. That's why I titled this presentation. Oh, sorry. And finally, this is trying to summarize everything else. High levels of emotional intelligence are correlated with better physical and mental health, better workplace relations, people coping with resilience, demands, and stress, higher levels of engagement, reductions in employee turnover, and so on and so forth. And that's why I titled my thing, so why are we still talking about this? And but when I say, why are we still talking about it, why is the whole world not moved into a mode of making sure when they hire people, they're hiring people who have as much emotional intelligence as they get, and when they bring them in, that they're developing them to have as much. And the reason is people like me and the industry I come from. The assessment industry has been responsible, and fellas like Goldman, who are academics, who write about these concepts in an academic way and don't tell you what to do next. They don't answer the so what question. And the big challenge is that for you to learn any new skill, and the skill of being Deiric McCann has taken me 59 years to perfect. So it's taken me a long time to get to perfect these imperfections, okay? And all of the behaviors that go with it. And if I want to change those, just a simple skill, I have to rehearse it 144 times. So what does the assessment industry traditionally do with something like emotional intelligence? Comes along, it gives you a big report, and it says, here's about 70 things that are wrong with you. If you change these, you'll motivate people. Go for it, boy. And it always reminds me of Charles Revson, the guy who founded Revlon Cosmetics. And he had a famous saying. He said, I'm like a mosquito in a nudist colony. I know exactly what I should be doing, but I can't figure out where to start. And that has been the problem. Most people know exactly what they should be doing. You read Goldman's book, and you know, oh yeah, I should be becoming more emotionally intelligent, but gee, I can't bend myself to fit this perfect model. And the reality is, you don't actually have to. And that's what the last 2002, the last 16 years has shown us, is that in everybody, there are one or two pivotal behaviors, one or two pivotal things in the way they show up that affect everything else. That if you change them, have a dramatic impact on everything. I always call it do you know what this is from? The kaleidoscope effect. When I was a kid, every Christmas, you could always be sure that there was one thing that Santa always brought because it was cheap and it came from Hong Kong. It didn't cost much. How many people used to get those? Those little cardboard. Yeah. The kaleidoscope. It was kind of a toilet roll holder, okay, with some cheap mirrors running in a kind of a triangle down the middle, a mirror on the end of it, and a bundle of cheap beads. And so when you looked through the lens, what you saw was with each of those hundreds of beads, you saw in one of the side mirrors on the triangle, you saw the reflection of the bead. And then you saw the reflection of the reflection in the end stop, and you saw the reflection of the reflection, blah, 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 and you ended up with what the geeks these days would call a fractal pattern, these wonderful patterns. And what we used to do, and I'm sure you used to do, if you ever played with a kaleidoscope, and I don't mean kaleidoscope 2.0 on the PlayStation. I mean, as I say, something that came from a toilet roll tube, was you look through it, and what the game tended to be, you look through, and you're looking at the pattern, and you try to turn it just as slowly as you possibly could until one bead moved. And one bead go, dum, dum, dum. And in the moment that happened, you got the reflection of the reflection, the reflection, 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 and the reflection of it beside something different. And one tiny bead moved, and the entire picture changed. And that is exactly the way it is with the way we show up to people. We do not have to become inauthentic and bend ourselves into somebody else's idea of what it is to be the perfect human being. What we have to figure out is, what are those things that I do right now that push people into this side of things, and what are the ones that I could authentically, without selling out on myself, change? So we help people to identify one or two or three things that they could change, one or two or three behaviors that they can make part of who they are. So we go through a process of putting them through something like what you did there with the good boss and the bad boss, except we do it in a more formal setting. And then we kick out something that looks like this and give you a really quick version of it. First thing we do is we say to all the people who work with you, how important is it that Deiric demonstrates awareness of the way he feels? 5, or 1, not at all important. All the way up to 5, extremely important. Whoa, sorry, what the hell did I do? Okay, let me just go back here, and I'm hoping this says, because my finish is not great. Is that the one? 2 left. This one? Teamwork. Thank you. It's amazing, isn't it? I work with that all day, every day. And you change the language, and oh my God, it's just... it should be autopilot. It should be absolutely autopilot. So we say, with exactly the same behaviors as we had there, under self-awareness, one of them was demonstrates awareness of the way they feel. And we say, hey, what do you expect from Deiric? What's important to you? How important is it to you that he demonstrates awareness the way he feels? And tell me, how well does he do that? He doesn't. Yeah, he does it reasonably well. Yeah, he's as good as anybody else, and he does it more than others. Okay? And what we do is very, very simple. We're trying to figure out, what are the behaviors that are most valued by the people that you are trying to impact, that you are showing least? So here we have, for example, the importance was 4.4. The people who fed back said it's 3.3. And when we calculate out the difference, we use nice traffic lights. We use nice traffic lights because at the end of the day, you're going to have 42 pieces of data. Nobody can handle 42 pieces of data. There's probably 2 or 3 pieces in there that if you change them, will change the entire picture. So we color code them with the traffic signals so that the red says, here's where the biggest gap is. Here's where you are failing to deliver what they most expect. Here's a big gap, but not as big. And here, whatever you do, keep doing this. Okay? So the idea here is very simply, how do you show up? How does that compare to the way people want you to show up? And what do you want to do about it? And the one thing you do not want to do about it is, let's take all of the reds and work out an action plan for how I'm going to change that, because you're setting yourself up for failure. The trick in this is to work out, what are the 1 or 2 behaviors that if I change them will really make a difference, but that I can live with, that fit me, that suit me, that work with me as well. For the millennials, they always want to know, am I as good as everybody else out there? How am I doing? How is brand Deiric? We have something built in here which is kind of a benchmark that gives you a snapshot of, here's what the rest of the world looks like. And so the extent to which your score is inside that box is the extent to which you are demonstrating that behavior as much as anybody else out in the workplace. So when we put that in front of you, what we're saying to you is, here is what we found out about you. Now, let's sit down and work out which one or two of these matter. Which one or two of these are worthy of a change. Which one or two of these you can take action upon and you can do something about. Because if we can help you after sitting down for 60 or 90 minutes, we can help you to figure out just one thing that will change the impact you have on people. And it's very frequently just one attitude, one behavior in there that makes all of the difference. We can help you identify that and change that. It changes everything. It's the kaleidoscope effect. So the approach here is one of find out what can I do right now? What's possible? What's easy for me? What am I and what will have the most value? And to drive that, we provide an awful lot of additional sort of supporting information around it. The whole drive that we always go for is how do I help somebody show up in a way that they get better results from the people that they're working with and they're working around. And it's therefore, and this starts to sound a little bit new agey, and it's not. I'm far from new agey. As you can see, I'm agey, but not exactly new agey. It really is a new way of being, because this is not about doing something different. It's not about affecting something. It's about changing the way that you show up in the world. It starts with observation. How am I impacting upon you? And by the way, a question we very frequently ask is, after we've shown people, here's the way you're landing on people, do you care? Because if he says, no, don't give a shit, I could care less. You know, there's an expression in English, I don't know who used it, a man or woman convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And so if somebody doesn't care to change, fine, let them get on with it. But if somebody says, yeah, shoot, you know what, it matters to me to have a different impact on these people, first thing we want to do is see these people, who are they, what are they seeing? Second thing we want to do is, here's what you do well. Because you know what, that 16 exemplifies it, that 12 exemplifies, that 10 and that 11 exemplifies the fact that these people were doing something right. Okay? There were some things that were just doing badly wrong, that just had the wrong impact. They might have been, as the English would say, what does they say? A weed is just a flower growing in the wrong place, is what the Brits say. And they may have been just the wrong sort of individual for that particular environment. And they might just have to change the way that they show up a little bit. And once you got that, here's not what's working, or here's what's not working for you. And then it is, as it says on the shampoo bottles, rinse and repeat. And nobody can rinse and repeat 20 behaviors. Nobody can change 20 things about themselves. God, it's all I can do to remember to put my glasses in my pocket in the morning. Okay? So there's no way that you remember to change yourself out of sight, but you can remember to do one or two things differently. You can learn that, and when you've rehearsed them sufficiently, they become who you are. So, rolling all the way back, the key thing for me with emotional intelligence is it's all about the way you show up, because the way you show up, which is a choice, determines the way people feel. The way people feel determines the extent to which they engage, and that determines everything else. And it's, as I say, whether it's your children, it's your husband, your wife, the person on the airline count, or the people that work with you or for you. The way you show up is absolutely critical. And that's why it takes 2 days to learn how to do this. The guys in Adeptus and Excels have already been trained in this. And they can come along and they can come in and do complete projects from front to back. Or they can come in and they can certify people in your organization to do this. So this is not about the assessment. The assessment is just the steak. It's about the sizzle. It's about what happens next. And the what happens next is is that process of sitting with somebody, helping to figure out, where do I start? So, why are we still talking about it? Well, after today, and after all the wonderful presentations you had this morning, I hope we won't just be talking about it, I hope we'll be going into action. And I know that the guys from Adeptus have some things they want to share with you on how they're going to do that. So thank you from me for laughing in the right places. Yeah, okay. There are some places, there's sometimes you say serious things, I swear to God. And you realize, oh God, I'm speaking Irish English. They're laughing at the serious parts, and they're not laughing at. So thank you for laughing at the right parts and not laughing at the other parts. And thank you for your attention. So have a really good day. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.